Welcome, welcome, welcome. And two more welcomes. Welcome, welcome to everybody joining us for a part of our continuing series where we talk to reporters, writers, professors, philosophers, activists, anybody on the left, anybody on the right, as long as they can talk clearly and coherently. We want to provide the perspectives to you unedited and unaltered so that you can do this thing that was popular back when I was in high school called thinking for yourself. Maybe we'll come back, maybe it won't. With us today, it is our privilege to have Professor Walter Parker, Emeritus Professor, Affiliate Professor, Political Science, College of Education, University of Washington. He's a Professor Emeritus of Social Studies Education, and by courtesy, Political Science at the University of Washington, Senior Fellow at the Center for Ethics and Education at the University of Wisconsin, a member of the National Academy of Education, and a Fellow of the American Education Research Association. Sorry, pardon me. My specializations are social studies curriculum and instructions K-12 and civic development of youth. My books include Educating the Democratic Mind, Education for Democracy, Teaching Democracy, Social Studies Today, Social Studies in Elementary Education, and Education for Liberal Democracy. He's also working on two projects. One aims to create a more engaging, authentic, and rigorous form of high school coursework, one that doesn't mistake superficial coverage at a fast pace for meaningful and rigorous learning, and one that takes curriculum decision making seriously. Working closely with teachers, my team developed a project-based approach to the high school AP government course. Another project examines civic education in the USA and elsewhere. Who creates the curriculum? What curriculum have they created? And by what authority do they create it? He has a PhD in curriculum and instruction from the University of Washington, Seattle, master's in social foundations of education for the University of Colorado, Denver, and also a political science degree. Some of the publications, we've already covered those. And professional experience. He was a chair of History of Education for a Democracy Panel, National Academy of Education, 2019. Chair of Teaching, Learning, and Curriculum, College of Education. Professor of Social Studies Education. Affiliate Professor of Political Science at UW Seattle. Visiting Scholar, Michigan State University, Penn State University, National Institute of Education at Singapore. Associate Professor of Social Studies Education at UW Seattle. And also an assistant professor of education at University of Texas, Arlington. And this is the book I wanted to interview about. But before we get to that, let's check in and see how well we did. Professor, did I say anything wrong about your background? Is there anything we need to correct at all?
Nope. Sounds good.
Okay. Let's get to the meat and the potatoes, as I like to say. What is education for liberal democracy? We were talking a little bit about this before, and you said something I love. What is this, and why is this important? And also, if you could say, when did you start focusing on this issue?
I've been focused on civic education since I was a high school teacher in Denver in the 70s. Then came graduate school, then came teaching at the University of Texas, then here in Seattle, University of Washington. But I've been focused on civic education in schools all the way through that, studying what forms civic education takes, doing research and development studies to improve civic education. And basically, civic education is a synonym in many ways for what school people call social studies education, which refers to mainly to the disciplines of history, government, and geography and economics. Those are the big four. And to call them civic education, to call that group civic education, helps make the point that what we need that education for publicly is for civic health, that you really can't have a liberal democracy without historical knowledge, without knowledge of the social sciences. So that's what schools can contribute to the difficult project of liberal democracy, is educating people in history, in government, in geography, and in economics. Let me point out here at the outset that I use the term liberal democracy, you might say technically, as it is used in the social sciences.
Right.
And if I could just, can I spend a minute just defining that term?
Yeah.
It's a hybrid. So there's an adjective part, which is liberal, and there's a noun part, which is democracy. The democracy part refers to elections and majority rule. It's what I think most of us think of when we think of democracies.
Right.
Elections and majority rule. Then the adjective part, liberal, narrows the majority's power in a way. It limits the majority's power so that they cannot violate individual rights. Liberalism is the philosophy of rights, and democracy is the philosophy of majority rule. So liberal democracy is a hybrid. You can also call it a republic, but there are other, like a constitutional monarchy like England or Japan or Norway. They wouldn't refer to themselves as republics, but they are liberal democracies. They still have the rights and the majority rule. So the focus of the book then is, what can schools do to support liberal democracy? And that's what I mean by civic education. Then, as you can see in the subtitle, I zero in pedagogically on classroom discussion. And
Right.
I think classroom discussion is certainly not a silver bullet, but it's probably the strongest tool we have for educating both knowledge and voice. So let me stop there and see what you might want to probe into.
Let me just read the introduction to the book. This is from the Amazon page.
Great.
Education for Liberal Democracy. Our democracy is in crisis. Both political trust and a shared standard of truth are broken, period, in statement. In this book, Walter Parker shows why and how civic education can help, offering a centrist approach suitable for a polarized society. When did you notice that our democracy was in crisis, that we had lost political trust and a shared standard of truth?
Yeah. Well, this is really a twofold crisis: the trust crisis and the truth crisis. The trust crisis would be known in social sciences as a legitimacy crisis. A democratic government has to be seen as legitimate by the people, otherwise they would rightfully overthrow it, just as our Declaration of Independence says. So the U.S. has been experiencing a legitimacy crisis at least since the Vietnam War and Watergate. Those are often regarded as inflection points when trust in government reduced precipitously. And it's reduced quite a bit more since then, particularly with the candidacy of Donald Trump, who the kind of the point of that candidacy was to reduce trust in government. So we have a legitimacy crisis combined with a truth crisis that we might technically just call an epistemic crisis. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. An epistemic crisis is a knowledge crisis. We are in a knowledge crisis because we don't appear to have any longer a shared criteria for deciding truth and fiction. Now, in some ways, we still do. We have jury trials, and trials by juries are matters of fact. And so the shared standard of truth is evidence. So evidence-based reasoning is still the modern world's go-to for deciding on fact and fiction. But in the current social media, everybody with their own echo chamber, everybody with their own truth pod, their own news feed, has put us into an epistemic crisis. There's you may know the science fiction author Neil Stephenson, and let me get his quote, which I love. hoping that I have it right in front of me. Yeah, he wrote, the ability to talk in good faith about a shared reality is a foundational element of civics that we didn't know we had until we suddenly and surprisingly lost it. So now we not only have a crisis of a kind of a stupendously ignorant public, ignorant of history, bewildered about history, but we now have a public that doesn't share a standard or a criterion for truth. And you combine those two crises, the legitimacy crisis with the epistemic crisis, and we have got a hell of a mess on our hands.
When did you notice we started having a problem with the standard for truth? I understand the trust crisis you can date back to Nixon, Watergate, and then say Trump exacerbated it, but didn't start it. That was a question I was already going to ask you, but you cut me off. You got to it ahead of time. That's great. What about the truth, this epistemic crisis? Did that happen with Trump and his origin of fake news, and we never saw anything remotely like that before Trump, or is it more complicated?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. A number of people date it to the popularity of cable news when we moved from network news. We moved from shared news to unshared news, would be one, fragmented news. Now, there's always been multiple news sources in different communities. The African American community, for example, has always been wary of the mainstream news, but so have other minority communities been wary of mainstream news and its primary narratives. So the advent of cable news, then comes social media and the fragmenting effects of social media, where a tremendous number of people now get their news from their news feeds in their social media and all the algorithms that go with it. But I think it was really exacerbated in a major way when we got a president who lied brazenly and relentlessly. And I state that as a matter of fact. I think there's plenty of supporting evidence for that. So I don't mean that as a political slur, just as a statement of fact.
Sure, yeah.
So combined with his very direct attack on news sources, he was interviewed by Leslie Stahl, I think that was CBS, who asked him why he was, and I think this was during the 2016 campaign, when he would often single out the news media in the middle of a crowd at one of his rallies, and he would attack the media. And she said, that's, an extraordinary thing to be doing, and to be calling them the enemy of the people. Why are you doing that? And he said, Leslie, why I do that is so that when you print negative things about me, nobody will believe you.
Right.
So it was a very direct, exacerbation of the epistemic crisis that had been brewing already. And now we're in the aftermath of that. I talk to young people, lots, college students in particular, who simply have no idea how to source the news. In a good history course, the name of the two skills are sourcing and corroboration. Sourcing means questioning the source in front of you and having skills to figure out who's writing it and what their motives might be and their context. Corroboration is being able to compare multiple news sources and to think through the conflicts there to arrive at an understanding of what the truth is. A lot of even college students that I talk with just this week have no idea what might be a trustworthy news source. They just feel that they're out at sea in a boat with holes in it and no life preserver anywhere nearby. They're really, really struggling to know what a true story might be.
Is that only for your conservative students and not for your liberal students, or are you noticing this as students across the board seem to struggle with this in America?
I would say students across the board. And they should probably have a better, since they are, particularly if they're in college classes, and hopefully they're in history classes, that's the field that deals with how do you determine what the truth is. Their field of study is everything that happened in the past. And then the trick is to figure out what really happened in the past. You have to be able to build what's called an evidence-based claim, or you might remember from your history class, that would be a thesis. Your thesis is your claim about what really happened at the Battle of Little Bighorn or in Hiroshima in 1945, or in Europe during the Renaissance, or in Africa during the pre-colonial period, what really happened. And to answer that question, you have to get good at sourcing and corroboration. So good history classes are training in how to source and how to corroborate. And then you just transfer those skills to contemporary affairs, the newspapers that you're reading, and the various news feeds that you are allowing into your life.
I love it. I love it.
As you can tell, Marcus, history education, I think, is a real cornerstone of civic education. And I work on that a lot in the schools.
I'm a gigantic history dork, so I'm having a huge problem staying focused on the subject and not going, let's talk about pre-colonial Africa. I have some opinions. Huge history guy. And this makes a lot of sense. And what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me too. I've noticed for the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a problem that's largely gone unnoticed. And that's that you have CEOs across America saying, we are not getting the skills out of all these great college grads that we need. They are super great at the computer program or the medical program or the engineering program or whatever app they need to run. And yeah, they got the technical side down. They're missing this thing called critical thinking, where they have no ability to suss out the information that's coming to them. They just grab the information and go, okay, well, here it is. And their boss is going, half of this is garbage. How come you didn't know that? I don't know how to think critically. I don't know how to compare sources. So CEOs, not hiring manager, chief operator, entire company saying this is a problem. So I'm sorry, I gotta let that ring out. Additionally, you have last month, there was a CEO of a British company, and he was talking about how he had trouble with his brand new college grads because they lack this ability called arguing with somebody without screaming and yelling in their face that they're just stupid and wrong, but actually going off facts. And again, another CEO saying, we're getting these great college grads. I have to teach them how to argue and debate with colleagues rather than just scream in their face that they're wrong and therefore stupid because they don't agree with them. So there seems to be a lot of evidence from corporate leaders that we are producing a lot of very educated people who lack the skills you're talking about. They don't know how to do sourcing. They don't know how to do corroboration. They don't know how to do debate or argumentation or anything like that. It's, I'm right, my sources say it, and then I'll yell at you if you don't agree. How did we get to this point where we lack all these skills? Did we always lack them? Did we have these skills before in the 50s and 60s with John F. Kennedy saying, hey, we need to get together to learn how to get to the moon and improve our students? Or is this something we've never had, or is it something we lost?
Yeah, it's a good question, Marcus. Is it something we never had? Is it something we lost? My approach to the problem is to focus on schools and schooling, by which I mean primarily K-12 education. That's my bailiwick. And the history education has had a secure place in schools for a very long time. And Historical knowledge, though, is not just knowledge of the past, which let's call that substance. It's also knowledge of methods of determining the truth. So substance and method come together in history education. History isn't memory. Everybody has memories. History is the discipline of knowing what's true and checking what's true about the past. So I'm very attentive to in the American history curriculum, which is strongest and normative in grades 5, 8, and 11. That's the primary U.S. history years. Grade 5, grade 4 very typically is state history. If your state, like you're in California, California has a well-planned state history curriculum in the 4th grade. So does Washington, my state. Most states do. And there's some attempt now to revitalize the 4th grade state history curriculum. There's a lot, it's both history and geography in grades 4. Then in grade 5, that's typically where you'll find an introduction to U.S. history, whether you're in Florida or South Carolina or California or Washington or Ohio or wherever. 6th grade is usually an introduction to world history. 8th grade, we return to U.S. history. After all, the kids are older now, their brains have developed. So it's not a repeat of what happened in 5th grade, though that wouldn't be bad because the brains have changed by then. 8th grade, though, the typically doesn't just deal with pre-colonial American history. 5th grade is typically pre-colonial American history, the natives that lived here, and then the colonization of this territory, and then the creation of the United States. Then 8th grade picks up from there and typically goes up and through the Civil War. And then 11th grade is typically when U.S. students get U.S. history for the 3rd time. And all of this is teaching students how to make historical claims, how to know what's true. So there's method as well as substance. And this is also the case with world history. If you're introduced to world history in, say, grade 6, then you're reintroduced to it in grade 10. That's what's most typical. And of course, your brain is developed by then, and you want to have a more mature understanding of both historical substance and historical methods. So I really focus on what can be done to strengthen K-12 civic education. And I focus, as the subtitle of my book says, I focus on both knowledge and voice. Can I say something about what I mean by those two terms?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me expand the intro here. I was going to ask you, so how do you teach liberal education to the students?
That's a good, when looking at when the kind of the about a third of the way down the new sentence, when children come to school. When children come to school, they emerge from the private chrysalis of babyhood and kin to interact with a diverse student body along with teachers, curriculum, and instruction, and the school's unique mission, which is to educate. So these assets make school the ideal place to teach young people the liberal arts of studying and discussing public issues and academic controversies, both in school and beyond. So I believe that to be very true. School is a really unique environment for teaching what knowledge is, what knowledge exists, what knowledge we have, how knowledge is created, along with teaching students to have a voice so that they can make uncoerced decisions. That's the classic philosophic definition of voice that I use in the book, making an uncoerced decision. So becoming an independent thinker, in other words. So we need to both know stuff, but we need also to be able to do stuff, and we need to be able to think for ourselves. So this is what school does, and it's not all powerful, of course, because there's many other extremely powerful forces in the social environment. Family being, of course, the most precious and the most important source of knowledge and skill. Then children move into school at some point, which are much more public environments because there are people there who are not like you. They're diverse environments, and that's really key to expanding one's social skills and expanding one's knowledge and brain as well. So the first bullet there, the proper aim of civic education in school is to shore up liberal democracy, this which we have spoken to. And I really zero in on how classroom discussion is one of the highest forms of doing that. That's why the most expensive schools that we can possibly find for our children, from an expensive private local school to an expensive private school like Harvard, really emphasize reading and discussion. Most classes are basically devoted to discussing what you've read.
Right. Argues that the proper aim of civic education in schools is to shore up liberal democracy, shows how discussion can be the main course of instruction, demonstrates how to use discussion to develop voice, defined as the freedom to make and express uncoerced decisions, explain why students need to learn both disciplinary knowledge and voice if they are to take the place on the public stage and hold the office of citizen in democracy. So as I understand, this is about teaching them that how to suss out information, as you said, source information, corroborate information, figure out if what they're absorbing is true or not. And it also teaches them that it's important to do that so that we have a functional country. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, well put.
Thank you. And this has always been a problem. We've talked about Nixon, Watergate, but it seems to have become excessively exacerbated with Donald Trump and his push for fake news. Do you see, what if Trump goes away? You know, what if he gets convicted from all these different convictions and he goes away? That means we don't have to worry about fake news ever again, Professor, correct?
I wish that were the case.
Why are you laughing? What?
Yeah, he will, and he will go away at some point, and we'll still have a tremendous epistemic crisis, the truth crisis. Where I zero in my work is on the what schools can do about the crisis, and to support both trust and truth. We have a trust crisis and a truth crisis, and my work is geared to seeing what schools can do about each of them. Fortunately, schools have assets. They have three key assets. They have a curriculum, which has been worked out in argument with amongst educators and parents, and a school curriculum results from that. Every one of the 50 states has a school curriculum. The school curriculum does not come from the national government. In our case, it comes from state governments. That's a key to understanding how federalism works. The military comes from the national government. The education comes from the state governments. Taxes come from both, of course. There's no shortage of taxes coming at us from all directions.
Right.
The curriculum comes from the state. Every state has its own process for developing the curriculum. There's a lot of arguments that lead to the production of that curriculum. Argumentation is good. in scholarship. That's how knowledge is produced. That's one asset the schools have. They have curriculum. Another asset they have is teachers to teach the curriculum. And another asset they have is a diverse student body. So you've got the key ingredients for schools to deliver teaching and learning to students, and for students to learn that curriculum. And as I mentioned in describing the history curriculum, students loop back on the same material as they move through the grades. That's
Right.
that's an asset. That is not a problem.
Right.
That is not bad repetition. That is good repetition, because their brains are developing as they age. So
Right.
there's three things that schools can and do. They one is discussion. Through discussion, you process the material you've read, you process the material that the teachers have taught you, and you process it with others in a way that develops social skills and knowledge at once. You develop the opportunity to develop voice, which is your own ability to make an uncoerced decision. And in a history classroom, for example, you're developing your voice about what happened in the past, what really happened. What really happened in the Civil War? What was the Civil War really about? What was World War I really about? Why did World War II follow so closely on World War I?
Sure. Sure.
Uh,
I do
Go
want
ahead.
to. I do want to ask you though. Why would we still have a truth crisis if Trump is gone? If Trump is the source of all the fake news and he's the one that brought all the fake news and everything worked out perfectly before him, then the moment he's gone, we don't have any need for civic education for children, correct?
Right. Not at all correct. Not at all
Why?
correct. Yeah, that's
Why
a
is that
really.
not correct? I'm in
Uh-huh,
California. This is
uh-huh,
all I hear. The moment he's gone, poof, everything snaps back into place. So
uh-huh.
sounds like you're saying that's not correct. And we might have lingering effects from the Trump era that we will take years to get rid of. Is that right? Why do we need to keep teaching children this if it's a problem that goes away the moment he goes away?
It's not a problem that goes away the minute he goes away.
What?
He's exacerbating a problem that will still be with us. We will still have a trust crisis and a truth crisis. And I'm not smart enough to know how all social institutions can combine to overcome those crises, but I do concentrate on what schools can do about it. And schools can do a lot. Unfortunately, schools are not the locomotive on the train. They are a little bit more like the caboose on a train.
Right, right.
So we have to be modest and circumspect about what schools can do, but at the same time, we need to empower schools to do what they can do, and what they can do is teach a curriculum
Right.
and help students learn it.
Right.
So I narrow down from the vast social crises that we confront to the role that schools can play. And what we can do with schools is improve the curriculum, constantly work on the curriculum, and we do that state by state. Each state has its own curriculum standards. Your state of California has its curriculum standards. They
Yeah,
have processes in place for revising the curriculum. Every
we
state
do.
every state does. It's important to be hip to what your local state processes are and what your California's social studies curriculum. I keep a very close eye on it.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, it's as good as anyone's. Uh,
Right.
New York, I keep a close eye on. I keep a close eye on Florida. Uh, I write textbooks for these states, and so I must know what the local curriculum standards are and work to make the curriculum materials that I write accessible and appropriate for the local state standards. I work a lot on my own small state, Washington, for curriculum standards in history and government and geography and economics. So schools do what schools can do, and it's really
Right.
important that we make sure
Right.
that the curriculum is good, that teachers are supported. I keep a very close eye on the high school government course in every state, or the middle school government course in every state. And I work with a coalition of associations in the state of Washington to make the high school government course a required course. So it's now required since 2020, I believe it is. Now we're trying to figure out a way to support the teachers of that course. You would face the same challenge in California and in any state. Once you require a course, then you have to figure out how to support the teachers of that course with professional development.
Sure.
And so I'm working hard on that front right here in Washington.
Sure, absolutely. You've answered most of the questions, and I feel that I have a good understanding of the study, and that's awesome. We're winding down. I want to ask you two more questions if I can. You're not me. You're a third-party person who's watching this, and they've watched the interview and they go, wow, I've learned a lot about the importance of civic education, how we got here, how we can get out. But I'm struggling to remember it all. But there was this one thing that the professor said, and it's 5 days after I watched the interview. And while I struggle to remember everything in the interview, there was this one thing the professor said I can't stop thinking about. What is that one thing you want someone you'll never meet and they can never stop thinking about when it comes to civic education in children?
That's a great question. I have to choose, you know.
You can have two different answers if you want. Or you want to have I would say this, or you can have up to 2 or 3 separate answers.
Well, let me remind us of what Mark Twain said, which is that history doesn't quite repeat itself, but it rhymes. So there's a tremendous need for us to have historical knowledge. And schools are set up to deliver historical knowledge. And as I've mentioned, there's sort of a scope and a sequence to the way schools do that. They teach world history, for example, in grades 6 or 7, and then again in 10. They teach state history typically in grade 4. In California, you do it more often than that, just like Texas does it more often than that. Huh. They concentrate on U.S. history in grades 5, 8, and 11. So schools are set up to teach knowledge, and what we need to do is support schools to teach that knowledge, particularly historical knowledge, not because history doesn't quite repeat itself, but because it rhymes.
Rhymes.
And so we want to support schools to do the very best they can do to teach historical knowledge in elementary, middle, and high school, and to not get lost in all the battles we are having over how history should be taught. There's a tremendous effort now to censor the materials that are in school libraries, particularly around, I guess there's an attempt to remove controversial materials from
I've seen that.
School libraries.
Catcher in the Rye.
Yes, lots of that would be from the literature curriculum, but it's terribly important for us to support the agencies that are set up to negotiate these curriculum controversies and produce a school curriculum in history, especially U.S. history grades 5, 8, and 11, world history curriculum in both elementary, middle, and high school again, and get that material taught to students so that they stand a chance of not repeating the errors of the past.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly why.
We need to remember and be humble about the fact that the public is quite stupid about history and politics.
What?
It,
Really?
or you may remember the South American historian Ortega y Gasset. He wrote the book The Revolt of the Masses, and wrote that we have a need for historical knowledge, not to fall back into it, but to see if we can possibly escape from the past. So there's a lot of work that we need to do for our society, and historical knowledge can really help. And so I think all of us need to support the schools, whether expensive private or tax-paid public. We need to support the schools in teaching our kids all the history that we can, because so much is at stake.
I agree. I think it was Zbigniew Brzezinski was an advisor to 3 different presidents during the height of the Cold War. And after he retired, he did a interview in Europe. This is the book the professor was referencing.
Yeah.
Zbigniew Brzezinski did an interview in Europe after he retired, where he said basically that the American people are so ignorant about the outside world and don't care and aren't interested, that basically the American government could do whatever it wanted foreign policy wise, and the American people would never hold them to account because they just knew so little and they're largely ignorant. That's Zbigniew Brzezinski, who advised 3 separate presidents, literally said that after he retired. Like, wow, this country is dumb and has no interest in knowing about the outside world. And our government can basically do whatever it wants around the planet. That's from a guy who advised 3 presidents. So I completely get what you're saying. Yeah, kind of a scary thought that the guy who advised 3 presidents during the Cold War would say that right the year before he was going to die on his deathbed, like he wanted to get the truth out, like he was somewhat bothered by the system he participated in. Yeah.
But
absolutely.
then here's the good news then, Marcus, is that schools work. Schools have curriculum. Schools have curriculum. They have instruction. They have teachers. They have resources. They have public funding. They have private funding. They have procedures set up for developing curricula, and the procedures include argument over what the curricula should be. So we need to really be supporting schools because they do incredibly important work. They're not only teaching history and government. I'm a big fan of the high school government course. I do a lot of work on it. I've done a lot of research on it. The research, most recently, the research has been supported by the George Lucas Foundation.
Hey,
Yeah,
Californian.
a good California outfit that works very hard to create school curriculum and then to post school curriculum reform efforts on their very good website. But there's a lot that schools can do. They're set up to teach people knowledge. Think of that. So let's get behind them and work hard to strengthen, in particular, the social studies curriculum. That would be the government courses, the geography courses, the history courses, and the economics courses. California is doing hard work on that front. I often look to California. Yeah, there's Edutopia. There's George Lucas himself. And you can see the high school government AP curriculum that my team has developed right there at that website. That group is doing terrific work. So I would say support the schools and support your local history, government, econ, and geography teachers. Write them a thank you note.
Let them know they're appreciated. I think that's important. I have some friends, and they went to go teach in Europe and in Asia and Russia. And the way they tell me is in other countries, high school teachers are high school teachers are worshipped like rock stars, and that they really, really appreciate everything they can teach them. A little bit different from here. And I loved my civic studies classes. I thought they were very important. Debate, government, history, very important. I completely agree with you. I think they're key, and I worry that it's getting worse because here you go. I wasn't making it up. That goes back from 2014 to 2022. Lots of employers saying, boy, you're making all these college graduates who can't think for themselves, can't decipher information, can't source anything, can't corroborate anything. But boy, can they write a computer program or figure out how to saw someone's leg off properly. That's where they've just dropped it out of our education system. And now it's over on the West, in Europe. So this is going back for about a decade. Totally agree with you and your work because other people are dropping the ball. And I think it makes us a more unstable country.
Yeah, the George Lucas Foundation, that, as you very well know, is in California, is doing a lot of very interesting work to support education, K-12 education. And I'd encourage your listeners to look at the Edutopia website, the Lucas Foundation website. They'll find the high school government curriculum that my team developed there that focuses on the advanced placement government course, partly because it's that the curriculum for that course is kind of sourced from the undergraduate college version of the U.S. government course. And it's kind of crowdsourced in the sense that many college teachers of the government course come together to hash out what the AP version of the government course is going to be. So you have a lot of good minds behind it. And we developed a project-based version of that course that is used throughout the country. And it's very active, student active. They play roles as Congress people and state representatives and Supreme Court justices and the whole bailiwick. So it's a fun course, but it also gets them good scores on the hard test known as the AP government test.
Nice. Yeah. I almost took that class. Okay. Winding down. I want to say thank you for coming out. You can also, for everybody, to check out the George Lucas School at Edutopia. A lot of great topics. They got one on critical thinking, one on inquiry-based learning. So a lot of what the professor was talking about. Please support your history, civics, government teachers, because it's super critically important. We have a real problem, as this article says. And consider getting this book. Whether you're a professional educator or not, if you have kids, if you're worried about kids, if you're worried about the state of the future, I agree. We're in a not exactly good spot. We as adults are not super great at sussing out our information and not staying in our own echo chambers. And I really believe it's going to be up to the new generation to unlearn some of the bad behaviors we've had in order to keep this country moving forward. So I would say get involved, pay attention. Don't view it as a child education issue, view it as a national security issue. Because if we totally lose these skills, then we're not going to do very well. I'll leave it there in the future.
Well put.
Thank you. I will. I'll send you a copy of the video soon. I want to say thank you. Oh, I want to ask you one last thing. Do you know anybody else who might be willing to be part of a conversation on political polarization or how to educate children out of it? You don't have to, but we always ask.
Yeah, I would suggest you connect with Joe Kahn at UC Riverside. Kahn is Kahne.
Okay.
Joseph Kahn, UC Riverside.
All right.
School of Education, terrific scholar, tremendous projects in California and statewide. Highly recommended. a brilliant guy, good person.
Joseph Kahn. Not Tracy. Oh, there he is. No, okay.
How's it spelled?
Kahn.
E.
Kahne.
I
There
can
he
double.
is. Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate that.
Another would be Diana Hess, Hess, and she's the dean of the ed school at Wisconsin-Madison.
There it is. Diana Hess, University of Wisconsin. Meet Dean Hess.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's where Levy once taught before he went to Albany. You interviewed Levy, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah,
right.
Levy, absolutely. Yeah, he was great.
She does really, really terrific work as well. Has tremendously interesting projects right now, just like Joe Kahn does. So,
Wow, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I will. I want to say thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, and I'll send you a copy of the video soon. And I really appreciate your time, Professor. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Take good care.
I'll talk to you soon.